Hello, Briat, yet again. How are
Hello,
you doing?
I'm doing all right. Keeping up in yourself?
Good. I'm. Every day is different. There's so much, and it's new. Like I don't recognize what's being asked of me to process and feel and change ultimately. Um, so I'm surprised by that. I'm surprised that there's already a shift in how I'm processing my world and myself in a very short amount of time. Mostly because I think that this is a line of demarcation that from this point on, life is going to be different than it used to be, and I feel possibility about that. I feel good about that. I think there's going to be lots of things to deal with, but I feel good about that possibility.
Yeah,
How do you feel?
I think a lot of people feel like that. It's more a question of how it will be different, which is remains to be seen.
I have absolutely no idea. It's really, there's no, the thing that I've come to understand is that there's no, and I pride myself in being able to foresee things before they happen. And there's just way too many things on the playing field so being preemptive doesn't seem to be an option, other than driving myself crazy. So really I've come to terms with the fact that I will deal with what happens. It's going to be after the fact. I have a good idea of the options of what could happen and
Yeah.
maybe some contingencies for a lot of them. But it's not. It's no longer about being preemptive. Okay, my friend. So we did talk about this time period that in humankind there's cycles and natural cycles of what the human experience is and society's experiences. So in the Bhagavad Gita, for example, speaks about these cycles. So maybe having a short conversation about these cycles and why we're bringing it up if you wouldn't mind, kind of bringing us into what this natural cycle is and any kind of distinctions about it that you can to help us understand the times that we're in now.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak about this. It's something that fascinates me a lot. A big difference between Western and Eastern thought is that in Western kind of thought, time is seen as very linear. That there was some kind of nothingness, there was a beginning and then it's progression, and at some point there'll be like annihilation. Whereas in Eastern thought, be it Vedic or Chinese or like that, Oriental, then they see it in terms of cycles, where human beings have existed for thousands and millions of years on this planet. And there's actually a lot of scientific evidence and archaeological evidence that supports anatomically identical human beings existing in times when humans supposedly were not supposed to exist. So I don't think I'll get much into that, but more seeing that they're talking about these cycles. And that each cycle, according to the Vedic Puranas, these ancient histories, they last 4.32 billion years. 4.32 million years, a cycle like that lasts. And then 4.32 billion years is like a larger cycle, but I won't talk about that. It gets a bit far out. And in these cycles, there are 4 ages, and they're called yugas, a yuga. They're called Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwarpa Yuga, and Kali-Yuga. Whereas Satya Yuga is called the golden age. It's the age where pretty much every human being is born enlightened. There's no villages and towns and cities because they don't need any of these things. All these people are so in perfect harmony, they don't need governments for managing things. And then as time progresses, then the next age, Treta Yuga, comes, and everything is pretty much in alignment still. But because the desires of people they get kindled a little bit more desire, meaning material desire, then some management is now required to make sure everybody is happy. But there's no disturbance yet. Then in Dwarpa Yuga, it's still like that, but the enjoyment and harmony of people are oftentimes disturbed by negative elements. But in the most cases, it's still very nice. And then when Kali Yuga happens, is that whatever good qualities remain, because as time progresses, time also etches away at the qualities of humankind. And then in Kali-Yuga, whatever remains also gradually diminishes. And one can compare that to the seasonal changes of every year. That every year you have these 4 seasons, or if you're in India, you've got 6 seasons. But there's a winter. If everyone has
in Cape Town, you have 6 seasons a day.
No, 6
so
a year. But actually, there's a time when actually one day we might experience all 6. But there's winter for all. That's the point. And the Kali Yuga is like.
Okay, so just 1 second. 1 second, if I could. You're going to have to talk slower. It's the sound isn't keeping up with you.
All right.
And just to be able to, so it's Kali-Yuga, so people can actually hear what the word is. And then, so you were saying? Seasons.
Yeah, like the seasons. Seasonal changes, so the ages also change. And just like after winter, there's spring and summer again. So after Kali Yuga, there will also be a shift back into the Satya Yuga age. And then another cycle will start. So there's information given about how that shift will happen, but I think it's a bit beyond the scope of the discussion now. But that Kali Yuga is like a winter. And in winter, conditions are more harsh. They're less pleasant. But still, if one can still thrive in winter if you know how to work with it.
And there's some characteristics of Kali-Yuga that I find interesting. If you could, like some of the more obvious ones about being able to identify that we're in Kali-Yuga is, can you talk about that? Like when you were talking about the politicians, for example, and there's a few other ones. If you could,
so
as examples of being in this time.
So there are some predictions that have been made in Puranas, such as the Srimad-Bhagavatam, which was written down 5,000 years ago, but it existed prior to that in a oral tradition. And they state things like, in Kali Yuga, the positions of government will be occupied by rogues and thieves. They say that the kings, they will tax the citizens so much, they will practically be drinking their blood. They will talk about that brother will fight against brother, and father and son will argue and fight with one another, and friends will quarrel and fight only about a few pennies or a farthing. It's kind of said like that. Just over a few coins, there'll be a big fight. And even love and everything will be given up just for something like that. And also your level of scholarship, or your kind of intellect will be judged by how good you're able to juggle words. So for those who don't know what word jugglery means, it basically means you're just spinning a bunch of words sounding like you don't know what you're talking about, but actually you're just talking a bunch of nonsense. So just speculation, which is what scientists also like to do a lot. There's a lot of jargon behind that. So, so some of these predictions are there. There are other interesting predictions also. Also keep in mind that in the time that these predictions were made, was still in the time where perfect monarchs reigned, where due to the proper administration of kings, there was no famine, there was hardly any disease, there was hardly any criminal activity, there was, people were happy, and there was opulence. There was not poverty and joblessness. Like that. Just 1 second, let me help this guy. Family life.
Okay. So are there any other ones? There's a few new ones there for me. So do you have any more that are, in the same vein of what you just said as the characteristics of the Kali Yuga?
Yeah.
Any more of those?
Yeah, they predict that lights will hang upside down, like electric bulbs. Then they had fire, so it goes up. Now the lights are upside down, electricity. They predicted that that pre-cooked food will be readily available everywhere.
Okay.
Excellent. Because according to Ayurveda, food that's older than 3 hours is considered old. Three that's been
Yes.
more than 3 hours after cooking, it's considered old. So,
Wow.
so quite the interesting one. So in those ages, you cooked and you ate. You did not save food for later. It was not like that.
Okay.
What else is there that interesting predictions that's relevant? Well, it's escaping my mind now, but there's a lot of them which are really, really interesting. And we see that these things, they're all happening right now. There's some more severe predictions which I think are less known today, but in the future we'll see them gaining more prominence. But I think they're a little bit grotesque in nature, so I won't mention them now. But,
Okay.
yeah.
And the fact, and how can one use these? Like, what is, I think you've already said it, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. So, for people that are just learning about these yugas, this natural cycle, so to be able to understand where they are and what meaning to put to the distinctions that we're talking about.
Yes.
What use? What do we want people to get out of the fact that this natural cycle exists?
It helps a lot with not trying to resist certain elements which are far beyond our control. For example, when it's winter, then everybody knows it's going to get cold and you have to deal with it. So you take certain measures to try and keep yourself warm, but still there's some austerities there. And by just knowing that it's winter and this is how it is already helps a lot in dealing with those conditions. Whereas one who constantly, every day, is just in his mind struggling with the fact that it's cold and they don't like it that it's cold, they're going to have a very hard time. Like my son, he wakes up and he complains, it's cold, it's cold. And then I found the thing that really helped the most is if I just told him, but it's winter, my boy, that's why. And then just understanding that, okay, it's winter, it's cold, it's not going to stop, what you can do. You can put something warm, but you're going to get in the shower and get out, it's not going to be so nice as it's summer. So, and that helps a lot. So I think similarly, by understanding that it is Kali-Yuga right now, and the qualities that we are seeing manifest in the world today are inherent to Kali-Yuga, then that helps a lot. It helps a lot in just making a bit of a shift in yourself, and then you can continue with this knowledge. It's not that you just kind of give up to it, but at least understanding that, okay, it's cold, but now what can I do about it? As far as where do my powers extend, and what are the limits of them?
Yes. And there's a lot of ancient predictions, whether it's the Mayan and the Aztec, or there's even the Bible itself this is an end of an era. This is end of times. Yeah. So and there needs to be change, and which is really quite obvious that there needs to be change, and it's happening now. So being able to know that, we've worked, human beings have been in a cycle for a very long time that sets this up, and now we've just begun a new rhythm and a new cycle, or new part of the cycle, to be able to do something about it. Yeah. So, and that, as you said, it's winter. So this is the cycle that we're in, and the sooner that you accept it and make adaptation, the better off that you'll be. And accepting, okay, this is where we are, now what? Yeah. Okay. So thanks for that. That's quite useful. What else is on your mind? What would you like to add to that? That's useful to our at this point.
I think also understanding that we are here in this particular age that have these qualities for a reason. Also, it's not just by chance we just born into this age. There must have been something in our consciousness that was attracted to here. There's something that we're supposed to learn. There's something that we're supposed to think about. There's something that we're supposed to develop within ourselves. So in that sense, if we're talking about law of attraction and that kind of things, like we were attracted here. So then one can take advantage of Kali-Yuga to actually assess the nature of this world nicely. which otherwise, if one is having a very peachy life, then you don't really think about the negative aspects of this world, which means you don't have a balanced view of reality in this world.
Sure.
Whereas in Kali-Yuga, there's always some kind of inconvenience there for most people, which then
Yes.
beckons you to ask some questions. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Oh, it's, I just lost it. There was something that you said, and now I've just I had a really good question for you, and now I've actually forgot it. So yes. So what else about the Kali Yuga?
So,
Being able. Oh, now I remember.
yeah.
Is that you were talking about that you're here for a reason, and that there's more than one place that some people don't believe that you have more than one life. If you're a spiritual person, you're mostly spiritual people will be the only ones listening to this, and the ones that believe that maybe we have more than one incarnation of being here, and that we choose this. Like one of the people that I listen to is and like the work of Cryon, for example, and he's talking about this time, and his words are old soul or light worker is that paraphrasing badly, is that calm yourself and be grounded. And he's speaking specifically about the quarantine and what's happening now, is saying that how did you think it was going to be? You're here for a reason, and that you're and you chose this time, and there's a job to do. There's something for you to do here. So, and being able to ground yourself in what's happening around you, and that how did you think it was going to be? What did you think was going to actually happen? What was going to happen? So that's it's like, well, what else could it be other than what's happening right now? And that I do feel like I'm here for a reason, and I do feel like that there's somebody's got to be here, and somebody's got to be able to interact with this, and and choosing this as you're learning. So I find it very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting comment, and also a very honest thought, is that that since we've chosen to come here, and from that perspective of when one chooses, one can kind of also see things a little bit more in a continuum. So it's actually kind of obvious, what this age is to become, and yet we still decided to come here.
What kind of characteristics do you see that are going to be useful in Kali-Yuga? Given the upside downness, that everything is changing, that there is the systems of power are changing, that things are coming to light, that this is the year of revealing, being able to see what's actually going on, specifically in regards to duality. What do you see as the characteristics? What characteristics do you value in yourself in being able to deal with the Kali Yuga? And then overall, what do you think is going to be most useful for people to cultivate?
I think that that the current events, they really starting to create more of a schism between where people are aligned with and what kind of authorities they're aligned with. Nobody can claim to have no authority. Everybody's always following something or someone. Even somebody, I was having a discussion, and they said that you should be your own guru and you should not listen to anybody else. And then I was thinking, but that's not even your own idea. You heard that from someone. And now you're quoting somebody else saying you should not listen to anybody else. Just a bit of a self. But the point is that we're seeing who we're aligned with. For example, at the moment, we're seeing that people are either aligned with the leaders of society today, which are pretty much the scientists and the politicians, who are basically one step under them. And when we get into conspiracies or things like that, we're just going to see about the scientists, they're making certain statements from whatever research they're doing, and this is driving the whole direction of society in a certain one way or another. And then the politicians are taking their counsel from them. So now people are now questioning that authority. Whereas before that authority was the church, like in the Eurocentric worldview. And then people rejected that, and then that authority shifted to academia, and now people are challenging that also. And they question the validity of that also. And there are people who are very strongly siding with the scientists and the politicians, and there are other people who are very strongly opposing them. And I can see that from the discussions I've witnessed, that they're quite charged discussions, that there's a lot of emotional kind of, I don't know, not baggage is not the right word, but emotional charge, like in this. So people feel very deeply and they identify very strongly with these positions. So I think that's one thing you can see a lot. And then we can understand that from like scientific sector, and then that includes things like big pharma and the medical sector and these things. We know that money makes the world go round, and that you can't get research grants if you do not to conduct a research which will make money for the people funding your research, which ultimately are people coming from the Rockefellers or the Rothschild or big pharma or big oil companies. They are the ones funding most of these things. So somebody who's questioning these things ultimately will think, okay, but why are these people so interested in funding? Why is the oil company interested in funding research for cancer? These are good questions to ask. So I won't venture into the answers, but people will start asking these kinds of questions, and we'll split. And I think from that split, you'll also see a new kind of society that will emerge, a society which lives in a more kind of harmonious, natural way, something more likened to pre-modern times. And it will be.
I want to jump in, to the first thing that you talked about was about people. There's very charged conversations about what people are believing in.
Yeah.
And there's what that brings up for me is that people believe that there's one reality, and that it's really who's got the best understanding of that reality, as opposed to that there's 7.5 billion perceptions of reality. Our need to be able to convince others of what my take on that reality is really quite important, and to prove that my reality is right to myself is being able to get as many people as possible to agree with me. And that's not going to happen right now. And really, and the fact that it's charged, that we're having such charged conversations about, a very nuanced, multi-leveled playing field is only going to create charged conversation. And that if it comes from a place of like needing to be right and needing to have the right view is what makes it charged. And being able to, we need to learn. This is the time where we're going to need to learn that swaying others to our way of thinking is old energy. And new energy is understanding people, understanding what their view is, and listening to one another. And we might not agree on, and it's a long conversation, but we have a lot of energy and time to argue with people, but we have, which is not overly fruitful investment other than creating separation for the most part. There's very little learning there, especially when people start getting reactive.
Yeah.
But being able to learn as much as you can, it's instead of job one being swaying others to my way of thinking, having job one be understanding other people's perspective. And then the last part of that, so the importance of that understanding the perspective, the more that we understand about where other people are, the more that we can actually know what kind of conversation that we need to be having. And then lastly is that human beings right now are, we have a habit of listening to people, and what we collect is the places where we disagree with them. And that we can agree at, 99.1%, but that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the part that we disagree about. And that we're going to have to learn as a starting point, because there is so much opinion and reason to have different opinion, and how each one of us has created our own world of the filter that we look through that adds the meaning to my world, is being able to start with what can we agree upon? What do we actually agree upon? You can move forward with what we can agree upon. and then constantly being in conversation about taking new ground. Now what can we agree upon?
Yeah, yeah.
And that there will be, and that's there, you can move forward. You can actually unite over what we can agree upon, as opposed to what we've been virtually the structure we're using is debate. And debate is, you don't enter a debate to lose, you enter a debate to win, as opposed to an inquiry and a dialogue is about learning and about exploring. And you can use the dialogue to look at what we can agree upon. All of that is very useful as a characteristic and something to do in this time. It will save, you can actually unite, you can take action, and that you don't waste a whole bunch of energy trying to sway other people to your way of thinking that are never going to agree from that conversation.
Yeah.
And then you moved into, that it's interesting, what grants are actually happening, like what's, the people that are supporting the thinking, and, that kind of points to, all of it's true, but I'm not really sure that there's much that we can do with that. I think most people are aware that that's happening. And it's part of what's being questioned. That's the biggest point of what you were saying is question. You start getting good at questioning what's going on around you, and being able to, and it takes me back down to discernment.
Yeah.
It's having a level of discernment, being able to understand your world and being able to understand your world together. The journalism was designed as the fourth dimension of society, to be able to be the watchdog on what's going on in society and inform the people so the people can write the course. And that journalism is not doing its job. Our sense-making mechanism for the world is broken. And that we're being forced to create our own sense-making. And that's what I was talking about in regards to inquiry and understanding. Okay, so those are my bits to your bits. So did anything else come up for you in regards to what I just said?
I think I like the point you made about having a constructive conversation. It can be debate about convincing another person. And my own kind of participation on social media platforms and things are also that's my mood also. That like you say something and somebody else says something, but it's more about just creating a platform for letting information to come out freely. And then the other people that will read through that, and then they can also then just make their own decisions on what is there. But at least things should be presented properly, and also one should not be afraid to make a strong stance on something. But at the same time, one should not be afraid to listen to contradict or contradicting information that contradicts to your position. Because if it's true, I want to know about it. I don't care what my position is. I want to know what's true. So I might feel very strongly about a position I've taken, but if you say something that contradicts that position, but what you say is true, then I want that. So I'm going to listen to what you're saying.
Yes, that's a perfect example. That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. What just came to me when you were speaking was one last distinction about that is the leaders of old energy, and the old energy is definitely debate and swaying the group to my way of thinking. The new leaders of the new energy is those that can create the conditions where learning occurs. So they're no longer interested in swaying the group to their way of thinking. Now they're actually creating the conditions where learning occurs for the group.
Yeah.
How can we learn together? Okay.
And a good debate is actually a person who's good at debating. It's not actually about winning the person that they're debating with. It's about convincing an audience. And the person you're debating with is just a vessel through which you're actually addressing a whole audience. And that debating with kind of can represent questions that an audience might have. And then you have to address those questions nicely. And at the end of the day, the audience can take from it whatever they want to. But ultimately, actually, you're talking to an audience, not to that actual person that you're having the dialogue with.
I think I would rather name that inquiry and exploration, because the difference between debate an exploration and inquiry is, in debate, you have an agenda, you still want to win, and that you're, in debate, you're not looking at the negative points in your view and the weak points in your view. You're only looking at the strong points in your view, and that you're only looking and you're only focused on the weak points in their view, and you're unwilling to look at the strong points in their view. That's the nature of debate. Is that really making a distinction of inquiry is definitely something different. That we're actually, I want to, the job one in debate is winning. Job one in inquiry is learning. I want to understand what your perspective is. I want to understand, because you assume that in debate, you assume that you're right. And in inquiry, you assume that you can learn.
I appreciate that. I like that. So inquiry then. So then what we're doing is we want to have a
debate has been, people have, for no, just because it's convenient and it's a word that everybody knows, but it's, if we really look at what the nature of debate is, this is what it is. I like to be distinct about that because it's, people fall into as soon as they think they're debating, they go back to, it's so our right arm, the arm that we've worked, we've gone to the gym, and we've really worked that right arm on debate where people are very, very good at it. But it's a insufficient system.
Yeah.
Especially for the time. Okay, so what else has come up for you? Anything else of interest?
Well, regarding the questioning, I think there are already a lot of people that have been questioning certain powers that be and decision makers prior to this epidemic. But what I think is going to happen now is that you're going to see a lot more people doing that. And also that the discomfort of the lower middle class and lower class people are going to become so much more that they're not going to be able to tolerate it. And it's like if you're locked inside your house and you don't have any money left, so you don't have any food left, you've got a wife and children that are hungry, and you don't have access to medicine, then what you're going to do, you're not going to stay put. You're not going to stay inside. You're going to go outside, and you're not going to be the only one either. And then something is going to happen. Some kind of revolution is a very, very real possibility in many places in the world where people are very poor. Like I'm just thinking about South African informal settlements, for example. Like they're not staying inside in a lot of the places because what are they supposed to do? There's no provisions being made for people. Or if I'm thinking about people living in the slums, in the ghettos in Sao Paulo, it's like, what can they do if there's something like that happening there? So you're going to have people united en masse. They're going to be united with a common cause. And what's going to happen? I mean, I won't venture into that possibilities. I think it's pretty obvious. But something like that could also shift the events quite significantly. Politically, socially, economically, it will have very far-reaching implications. And I think that especially in poorer countries, like we're in Africa, so in Africa, things like that.
Sorry.
You've got your kids.
My cat decided that it was going to join our conversation.
Right. Hello, cat.
So in regards to food and medicine and people not having, you're absolutely right that's a possibility, along with a whole bunch of other ones as well. And I don't think it's one that I'm not entering into this being afraid. Is that no matter what happens,
Yes.
there is going to be difficulties. I have no idea. There is a plethora of options of things that could happen. And I'm not worried about, I'm not going to think a lot about what could happen. I'm going to think a lot about, just being grounded in the face of whatever does happen and deal with what does happen.
Yes.
Being preemptive is not something that's actually working. I pride myself in being able to read the signs of what's happening economically, socially, around me at a macro and a micro level. And it's not, being preemptive at this time is not a really turning out to be a profitable endeavor.
Yes.
Is that having looking around and keeping my eyes open and staying grounded and watching what happens. But I'll only be able to interact with what is happening. So there's a little bit of a wait and see that's gonna is going to happen. But regardless of what that is being grounded as an old soul, for those that see themselves as one, or a light worker that is there to provide knowledge and grounding for those around them. Is the most important thing is being grounded and logic, being logical about what's happening, taking a look at the overview of what's going on, and then no matter what that is being grounded in the face of it. If it's not true, like there's a lot of information out there that's not true, and if it's not true, it can never hurt us, and it's not happening. So I don't really need to be afraid of that. All I need to do is be able to determine what's true and what's not true as it happens, as it occurs, and keep being logical and grounded in being in that process of doing so.
Yeah, that's very nice. I appreciate that point, that one should not approach it in a fearful manner. In fact, in the Vedic literature, this planet, the purpose of this planet is called a tapa loka. It means it's a dimension meant for austerity and work. It's not a place that's meant for enjoyment. Yes.
You harmonicized. I couldn't understand one word you said. Could you say that again?
In the Vedic literatures, this planet is described as a tapo loka, which means it's a planet meant for performing austerities and work. It's not a place of enjoyment. And that particularly human life on this planet is for austerity. So we find that it's impossible to avoid austerities and inconveniences. Are you still connected to me?
Okay.
Are you connected to me?
Yeah,
there was a bit of interference.
Yeah, I can't hear any of your words actually. It's I think something slowed down. So
Okay.
you're even frozen. Your face is frozen, and yeah. I think this might see if you can make that point one last time, and then we'll see. I think this might be an ending for us. So give it a wing.
All right. So human life on this planet is meant for austerity. And we find practically that it's actually impossible to avoid any kind of austerity or inconvenience on this planet as a human being. So the question of austerity and inconvenience, or there's no question about performing austerity and accepting inconveniences. The question is more, for which purpose am I performing austerity?
Yes.
So then in that sense, it's a fear to be inside. So instead of resisting it, one just accepts it. Okay, this is an austerity. Austerity is something that can give you strength. Nothing.
Speak slower, speak slower, speak slower.
Austerity is something that can give you strength. What are you going to use?
I think. Yeah, the sound is not working.
All
so right. What I hear you saying is austerity and inconvenience is something that we're going to deal with on this planet, and specifically in this time. And if that's true, being able to be disciplined and to like our great grandparents, they lived off the land. I don't know about yours, but at least great grandparents, they lived off the land. They had a whole lot of skills around medicine from plants. They knew how to can food. They knew how to be sufficient on their little plot of land, however big that was. And we've lost all of those skills. And that might be required yet again, is that we have no relationship with our food. We go to the store, we think that well, everybody knows it. You know, the berries aren't grown in that section. So, really being able to be self-sufficient again, we've lost all of that skill.
Yeah.
And that may be asked of as an example of inconvenience and austerity.
Yes. And now we
It could be a million other things. I'm not saying it's going to be food. It may or may not be.
Yeah, that's a nice point. So then to what end are we then accepting inconveniences? What are we using that for? Because austerity basically means voluntarily accepting inconvenience. So at the moment you experience inconvenience and you surrender to it, you actually voluntarily accept it. And then austerity is a way of generating a lot of mental and spiritual strength. And you can spend that for something. Yeah.
You got to slow it down.
Okay. I think it's recording properly on my side. Maybe we should end the conversation. I think it was good until now.
I don't know it was good until now. You're breaking up now almost every sentence. So I think that we should make this an ending point. And I think the point is, again, why are we choosing austerity and inconvenience? And that you can complain your entire way through it, or that you can come to the place of acceptance. That I accept the austerity, I accept the inconvenience,
Right.
and making your experience less painful, so you're not suffering through. Like the Buddhists say, is all suffering is based on not accepting what is.
Yes.
So I think that's what you're alluding to as well. Sorry, Briat, but I think we need to end this now, and hopefully that people can make heads or tails of what happened there. And so what were you saying?
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a nice conversation again.
Very nice to see you and talk to you again. Yeah, I'll speak to you again tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Haribol.